Jake Morrison stood near the large window of the space station, looking out at the swirling clouds of the gas giant below. The view never got old, even after 3 months aboard Harmony's Edge. The space station was huge, bigger than any human city, and it floated peacefully in orbit around Kepler 442b. This place was special. It was where different alien species came together to talk about peace and solve problems without fighting. Jake wore his dark blue Earth military uniform with pride. The silver bars on his collar showed he was a lieutenant commander. At 32 years old, he had served in Earth's space forces for 10 years. His brown hair was cut short and neat, and his green eyes were always alert. Jake was not the biggest or strongest human, but he was smart and quick to think. The reception hall around him buzzed with activity. Aliens from 12 different worlds moved around the room, talking in groups. Their translators made it possible for everyone to understand each other, though sometimes the devices made strange beeping sounds when trying to translate concepts that did not exist in other languages. Jake watched a group of crystalline beings float near the ceiling. They looked like living diamonds, their bodies catching and bending the light in beautiful ways. Their voices sounded like wind chimes when they spoke. Near the food tables, several hive mind representatives stood together. They looked like giant insects walking on 2 legs, with 4 arms each and large compound eyes that saw in all directions at once. Captain Lisa Park walked up to Jake, holding 2 glasses of something that looked like blue water, but tasted like earth oranges. She was his boss and the head of Earth's delegation to this peace summit. At 45, she had gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from years of making tough decisions. "The Saurians are here," she said quietly, handing Jake his drink. "They just arrived on their ship. Big delegation this time." Jake nodded. The Saurians were one of the oldest species in the galaxy. They had been exploring space when humans were still learning to make fire. Their home world was a tough place with heavy gravity and dangerous animals. This made them strong fighters, but also very proud. "Any word on their mood?" Jake asked. "Same as always. They think they know best about everything," Lisa replied. "Just remember, we are still the new kids here. Earth only joined the Galactic Council 15 years ago. We need to be careful not to make enemies." The main doors of the reception hall opened with a soft hiss. 6 Saurian peacekeepers walked in, and the room seemed to get quieter. They were impressive to look at. Each one stood nearly 8 feet tall, with thick green and brown scales that covered their bodies like natural armor. Their heads were long and narrow, with yellow eyes that missed nothing. Sharp claws extended from their fingers, though they kept them retracted as a sign of peace. The leader of the group was easy to spot. He was the biggest, with darker scales and old scars on his arms that spoke of many battles. His name was Zektar. Voss and Jake had read his file. Voss was over 200 years old and had been a peacekeeper for most of that time. He had fought in 7 major conflicts and helped end 3 wars. Through single combat, the Saurians moved slowly through the room, their heavy footsteps making small vibrations in the floor. Other aliens stepped aside to let them pass, showing respect for their reputation as warriors. Jake noticed how the crystalline beings dimmed their light slightly, and how the hive mind representatives clicked their mandibles in what he had learned was their version of a polite greeting. Voss stopped near a group of younger peacekeepers from different species. His voice was deep and rough, like rocks grinding together. "Another peaceful year in the galaxy," he said, but there was something in his tone that suggested he was not entirely happy about it. A young ethereal peacekeeper, one of the gas-like beings that lived in special suits, responded. "Peace is what we work for, honored Voss. It is our greatest achievement." Voss made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a pleasant sound. Peace built on strength, yes. But some species ... double quotes. He paused and looked directly at Jake and Lisa. Some species talk about peace, but know nothing of the strength needed to keep it. Jake felt his jaw tighten. He had heard comments like this before. Many of the older alien species looked down on humans. They thought Earth was too young, too violent, too unpredictable to be trusted with galactic affairs. Lisa put a gentle hand on Jake's arm, a warning to stay calm. But Jake had spent 3 months listening to veiled insults about his species. He was tired of it. Is there something specific you wanted to say? Jake asked, stepping forward. His voice was polite but firm. The room got very quiet. Conversation stopped, and alien heads turned to watch. This was not how diplomatic receptions usually went. Voss turned his full attention to Jake. Up close, the Saurian was even more intimidating. His yellow eyes studied Jake like a predator looking at prey. "Young human," he said slowly, "your species has been part of our council for 15 years. In that time, you have been involved in more conflicts than any other member species." "We have helped solve more conflicts than we have started," Jake replied. "Earth's peacekeepers have a good record." "Peacekeepers?" Voss's scales seemed to darken slightly, a sign of anger in his species. "Your people solve problems by fighting. You call it peacekeeping, but it is just war with a different name." Other aliens moved closer, sensing drama. Jake could see representatives from the Aquatic Union, their water-filled helmets reflecting the room's lights. The insectoid Nexus representatives clicked excitedly among themselves. Even the usually calm ethereals seemed more focused than usual. "Fighting is sometimes necessary to protect the innocent," Jake said. "We do not start wars, but we finish them when they threaten peaceful people." Voss took a step closer. Even though Jake was 6 feet tall, he had to look up to meet the Saurian's eyes. "This is exactly what I mean. Your species thinks violence is always the answer. You are too young, too primitive to understand true strength." The insult hit home. Jake felt his face get hot, but he kept his voice steady. "Primitive? Earth has contributed new technologies, new ideas for conflict resolution, and successful peacekeeping missions across the galaxy. What exactly makes us primitive?" "Experience," Voss said simply. "My people have kept peace in this galaxy for 3,000 years. We understand the weight of true responsibility. Humans are children playing with weapons they do not understand." "Captain." Park stepped forward. "Honored Voss, perhaps we should discuss this privately. There is no need to make this a public matter." But Voss was not finished. "No, Captain Park, this is exactly what I mean. Your species hides from direct confrontation when it suits you, but uses violence when you think it will work. You have no honor." The word honor hung in the air like a challenge. Jake knew enough about Saurian culture to understand what was happening. Honor was everything to them. To question someone's honor was one of the worst insults possible. "Our honor comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves," Jake said. "We do not need to prove it through ritual or ceremony." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Perhaps you do. By the ancient laws of my people, any species whose honor is questioned may settle the matter through formal combat. I invoke this right." The room went completely silent. Even the background hum of the station's life support systems seemed louder. In the stillness, Jake felt every alien eye in the room focused on him. Elder Morden, one of the ethereal peacekeepers who served as a senior mediator, floated forward. His gas-like form glowed softly inside his containment suit. "Honored Voss, are you certain? Combat invocation is a serious matter." "I am certain," Voss replied, never taking his eyes off Jake. Let the human prove his species worthy of the respect they demand. Jake's mind raced. If he refused, it would confirm everything Voss had said about humans being cowardly. Earth's reputation in the galactic community would be damaged, possibly permanently. But if he accepted, he would be fighting one of the most experienced warriors in the galaxy. Captain Park moved to his side. "Jake, you do not have to do this. We can find another way." But Jake looked around the room at all the alien faces watching him. Some showed concern, others curiosity, and a few seemed to be waiting for him to back down. He thought about Earth, about all the humans serving across the galaxy as peacekeepers and diplomats. He thought about the children back home who dreamed of exploring the stars. "I accept your challenge," Jake said clearly. Voss showed his teeth in what might have been a smile. "Good. Tomorrow, in the ceremonial arena. Non-lethal weapons and techniques. Only victory by surrender or incapacitation." Elder Morden sighed, a sound like escaping steam. "Very well. I will serve as referee. The combat will take place at midday ship's time. All interested peacekeepers may observe." As the crowd began to buzz with excited conversation, Jake realized what he had just agreed to. In less than 24 hours, he would be fighting a warrior who had been perfecting his skills since before Jake's great-grandfather was born. Captain Park looked at him with a mixture of pride and worry. "I hope you know what you are doing." Jake watched Voss walk away, surrounded by his fellow Saurians. "So do I, Captain." "So do I." The news of the challenge spread through the space station like wildfire. Within an hour, every alien delegation knew about the upcoming duel between the human peacekeeper and the Saurian warrior. Groups gathered in corridors and meeting rooms, discussing what they had witnessed and what might happen tomorrow. In the crystalline collective section of the station, 5 diamond-shaped beings floated in a circle, their bodies pulsing with different colors as they communicated. Their light patterns showed deep concern. "The human cannot possibly win," pulsed Kethara, her form shifting from blue to worried orange. "Zektar Voss has centuries of experience. The size difference alone makes this impossible." "Perhaps that is the point," replied Murden, his crystalline form remaining a steady white. "The Saurian may be trying to prove that humans do not belong in our circle. A public defeat would damage Earth's standing significantly." The hive mind representatives had gathered in their own meeting space. Unlike other species, they could share thoughts instantly among themselves, making their group discussions very efficient. The lead representative, designated Speaker of Many, stood slightly apart from the others. The collective calculates a 97.3% probability of Saurian victory, Speaker of Many announced to the room. Human physiology shows no advantages in this scenario. Zektar Voss possesses superior reach, natural armor, and combat experience that spans longer than the human's entire species has been spacefaring. In the Aquatic Union's water-filled chambers, Ambassador Tidalflow communicated with his schoolmates through rapid color changes across his scales. Their analysis was equally grim for Jake's chances. "The human will be broken quickly," Tidalflow's patterns indicated. "Saurian claws can pierce metal. Human skin will offer no resistance." But it was the ethereal collective that provided the most detailed analysis. Elder Morden, who would referee the match, floated in his private chamber reviewing everything known about both species' combat capabilities. The data was overwhelming. Saurians evolved on Kethmara, a world with gravity 1.7 times that of Earth. The planet was home to massive predators that required exceptional strength and toughness to survive. Over millions of years, this had produced a species with natural body armor, powerful muscles, and reflexes suited for dealing with large, dangerous opponents. Zektar Voss himself was exceptional even among Saurians. His service record showed victories in formal combat against representatives of 8 different species. He had never lost a duel and had only been seriously injured twice in over 2 centuries of fighting. Humans, by comparison, seemed almost fragile. They came from a world with standard gravity and had evolved primarily as persistence hunters. While this gave them good endurance, it hardly seemed relevant in a combat situation where the fight would likely be decided in minutes. Elder, Morden made calculations and ran probability models. Every scenario he could imagine ended with the human being quickly defeated. The only question was how badly Jake would be hurt before he surrendered Dot in the human delegation's quarters. Captain Lisa Park sat across from Jake at a small table. Between them lay a tablet displaying everything they could find about Saurian combat techniques and Zektar Voss's fighting history. "This is not good, Jake," Lisa said, scrolling through video footage of previous duels. "Look at this fight from 6 years ago. Voss against a Nexus warrior. The insectoid had 4 arms, natural weapons, and reflexes faster than most species can even see. Voss beat him in under 3 minutes. Jake watched the recording carefully. The Nexus warrior was quick, striking from multiple angles with razor-sharp limbs. But Voss had fought patiently, letting his natural armor absorb the attacks while he waited for the right moment. When it came, one powerful strike had ended the fight. What about this one?" Jake asked, pointing to another file. Lisa opened it. 2 years ago. Voss versus a crystalline warrior. Those beings can change their density and shape at will. Watch." The crystalline fighter had been clever, flowing around Voss's attacks and striking from unexpected angles. But again, the Saurian's patient approach had won. He had waited until the crystalline being committed to a solid form for a major attack, then struck with devastating precision. "He is smart," Jake observed, "not just strong. He studies his opponents and waits for them to make mistakes." "That is what worries me," Lisa replied. "You have good training, Jake, but you are going up against someone who has been perfecting his craft since before your grandfather was born. The experience gap is enormous." Jake leaned back in his chair, thinking. What do we know about human advantages? There has to be something. Lisa pulled up Earth's biological data. Well, humans have good endurance. Our persistence hunting background means we can keep going longer than most species. But in a short combat situation, that might not help. What else? Flexibility. Human joints have a wider range of motion than most species. Saurians are strong but not very flexible due to their heavy bone structure and thick scales. Jake nodded, storing that information away. Reaction time? Actually not bad. Earth's gravity is lighter than the galactic average, so humans who grow up in space or on low-gravity worlds can be quite quick. But your reactions are still not faster than a trained Saurian warrior. They spent the next several hours going through every piece of data they could find. Jake learned that Saurian scales were weakest at the joints, that their vision was not as good in dim light, and that they preferred direct, powerful attacks rather than complex combinations. Meanwhile, word of the betting pools had reached the human quarters. The odds were not encouraging. 15-1 against you, reported Lieutenant Gary Watson, Jake's aide. Some of the younger aliens are giving 20-1 odds. The only species not betting against you are the ones who think betting on such things is inappropriate. What? About the Peacekeepers who have worked with humans before? Jake asked. They are concerned but hopeful. A few ethereals who served with human units in the border conflicts spoke up for our combat abilities. But most of the galaxy has only seen humans in diplomatic or support roles. That was the heart of the problem, Jake realized. Humanity was still new to the galactic community. Most aliens had never seen humans in real combat situations. They judged human capabilities based on their appearance and what they knew about Earth's relatively peaceful development. As the station's night cycle began, Jake found himself in the observation deck again, looking out at the stars. Other beings moved around the space, but they gave him plenty of room. Word had spread about tomorrow's duel. and many seemed to view him with a mixture of pity and curiosity. Captain Park joined him at the window. Second thoughts? No, Jake said without hesitation. But I keep thinking about something. All these aliens, all these species with hundreds or thousands of years of spacefaring experience, and they all seem to think the outcome is certain. It does look bad on paper, Lisa admitted. But they are missing something, Jake continued. They are judging us based on what they know about their own kinds of fighting. Saurians fight other Saurians. Crystallins fight other crystallins. They all have established patterns and expectations. Lisa looked at him with growing understanding. But humans fight differently. Exactly. We did not evolve to fight other. Humans in formal combat. We evolved to hunt animals that were bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than us. We learned to win through teamwork, persistence, and intelligence rather than raw power. This is single combat, though. No teamwork allowed. Jake smiled for the first time that day. No, but persistence and intelligence are still allowed. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, Lisa spoke again. The whole galaxy will be watching tomorrow. Whatever happens, you will be representing all of humanity. I know, Jake replied. That is why I have to win. In the Saurian quarters on the other side of the station, Zektar Voss prepared for the next day's combat with the methodical care of centuries of experience. He reviewed the limited data available on human physiology and combat capabilities, though there was not much to study. Humans had been involved in several peacekeeping operations, but always as part of mixed species teams. There were no records of human-only combat units or detailed analyses of their fighting techniques. This bothered Voss slightly. He preferred to know everything about his opponents before facing them. His aide, Korthas, brought him additional information. The human service record shows intelligence and quick thinking. He has been decorated for his performance in 3 peacekeeping missions. What kind of performance? Voss asked. Primarily tactical planning and crisis management. There are no records of personal combat, though his training scores were above average for his species. Voss nodded. This fit with what he knew about humans. They seemed to prefer avoiding direct confrontation when possible, using technology, and planning to solve problems. It was not an approach he respected, but he acknowledged it could be effective in certain situations. Have you found any information about human combat techniques? Very little. They appear to use a variety of fighting styles, but nothing that seems particularly effective against armored opponents. Their military training focuses more on weapons use than hand-to-hand combat. That made sense to Voss. Humans were physically weak compared to most galactic species, so TH. The ceremonial arena of Harmony's Edge had never seen such a crowd. Representatives from every species aboard the station packed the observation decks that surrounded the circular combat platform. The arena itself was 50 meters across, made of a special metal that could absorb energy weapons and resist damage from even the strongest alien fighters. Jake Morrison arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled duel time. He wore simple black training clothes and soft-soled boots that would give him good grip on the arena floor. Around his waist was a belt containing basic non-lethal weapons allowed by the rules: a stun baton, sonic disruptor, and restraint cables. Noise from the crowd was incredible. Dozens of different species created a symphony of sounds: clicking, humming, whistling, and various electronic translations. Jake had never been the center of so much attention, and he tried to block out the distracting noise. Captain Lisa Park walked with him to the arena entrance. Remember what we discussed. Do not try to match his strength. Use your advantages and stay mobile. I will, Jake replied, though his mouth felt dry. Now that the moment had arrived, the full weight of what he was about to attempt hit him. He was going to fight one of the most experienced warriors in the galaxy. While hundreds of aliens watched, Elder Morden floated above the arena in his containment suit, his gaseous form glowing softly with anticipation. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored beings," his voice carried clearly through the arena speakers. "We gather today to witness a formal challenge duel between Zektar Voss of the Saurian Peacekeeping Force and Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of Earth's Space Command." The crowd's noise increased. Jake looked up at the observation decks and saw alien faces pressed against the transparent barriers. Some looked excited, others worried. A few crystalline beings had dimmed their light, which he had learned was their way of showing respect for someone they thought might die. "The rules are simple," Elder Morden continued. "Victory comes through surrender or incapacitation. Non-lethal. Weapons and techniques only. Any attempt to cause permanent harm will result in immediate disqualification and criminal charges." Jake nodded, though he wondered how much damage Voss could do while still technically following the rules. Saurian claws and strength could break bones easily, even without trying to kill. The arena's main entrance opened with a deep rumbling sound. Zektar Voss stepped onto the combat platform, and the crowd's noise changed to something like awe. The Saurian warrior looked even more impressive in the arena's bright lighting. His scales seemed to shimmer with their own inner light, and every movement showed the controlled power of a master fighter. Voss carried traditional Saurian weapons, a pair of curved metal clubs designed to extend his natural reach and striking power. The weapons were legal under the Duel rules since they were designed to stun rather than kill. But Jake knew they could still break every bone in his body if they connected properly. The size difference between the two fighters was startling. Jake stood 6 feet tall and weighed about 180 pounds. Voss was nearly 8 feet tall and probably weighed over 400 pounds, most of it muscle and bone. To the alien observers, it looked like a child preparing to fight an adult. "This is madness," whispered Cathara from the crystalline viewing section. Her form pulsed with worried orange light. "The human will be crushed." In the insectoid section, Speaker of Many's compound eyes tracked both fighters with mechanical precision. The collective maintains its prediction, 97.3% probability of Saurian victory, but not everyone was certain. In a small section, reserved for beings who had worked directly with humans, a few voices spoke differently. "Do not underestimate them," said Veltar, an ethereal who had served alongside human peacekeepers in the border conflicts. "I have seen humans do surprising things when pressed. They are more dangerous than they appear," agreed Aquatic Ambassador Deep Current. "My school learned this during joint training exercises. Humans think differently than other species." Jake tried to ignore the crowd and focus on his opponent. Voss was performing what looked like a traditional Saurian war dance. Slow, powerful movements that demonstrated his strength and fighting ability. Each gesture was precise and controlled, a display of the martial perfection that had made Saurians respected throughout the galaxy. The dance was also psychological warfare, Jake realized. It was meant to intimidate opponents and show them exactly how outclassed they were. Jake had to admit it was working. Watching Voss move with such controlled power made Jake very aware of how much trouble he was in. But Jake had his own preparations to make. While Voss performed his ritual dance, Jake began moving through what looked like simple stretching exercises. To most observers, he appeared to be warming up his muscles, or maybe trying to calm his nerves through movement. In reality, Jake was doing something very different. He was mapping the arena, calculating distances and angles, testing the friction of the floor surface with his feet. His constant movement was letting him gather information about the fighting space while appearing nervous or restless to the alien observers. Jake's movements were not impressive to look at. Where Voss's dance was all power and precision, Jake seemed to fidget and shift his weight randomly. Several aliens in the crowd made sounds that their translators rendered as sympathetic clicks or sighs. The human appears extremely nervous. Observed a Nexus representative. His movement patterns show no recognizable combat preparation. What the aliens did not understand was that Jake's random-looking movements were actually a form of combat preparation they had never seen before. Humans had developed these techniques through millions of years of hunting prey that was bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than themselves. The key was not to look threatening until the moment of attack. Elder Morden raised one gaseous appendage. Combatants approached the center. Jake walked to the middle of the arena, his steps light and easy. Voss strode forward with heavy, deliberate footfalls that made small vibrations in the metal floor. When they were 10 feet apart, both fighters stopped. "Bow according to your customs," Elder Morden instructed. Voss performed a formal Saurian. Bow, lowering his head and spreading his arms to show respect for the combat tradition. Jake gave a simple Earth military salute, then added a slight bow of his own head. "The challenge was given and accepted in honor," Elder Morden announced. "Let this combat determine the truth between the species. Fighters, prepare yourselves." Voss immediately fell into a classic Saurian fighting stance. His feet were planted wide for stability, his clubs held ready to strike or block. Everything about his posture radiated controlled aggression and defensive readiness. Jake's stance looked very different. He kept his feet closer together and stayed light on his toes, shifting his weight constantly. His hands were relaxed at his sides, and he kept moving his head slightly, as if looking around the arena. To most observers, he looked unprepared and possibly frightened. "The human's form is all wrong," muttered Korthus from the Saurian viewing section. "He will be defeated quickly." But Captain Park, watching from the human delegation area, smiled. Slightly. She recognized what Jake was doing, even if the aliens did not. He was not preparing to fight like a Saurian or any other galactic species. He was preparing to fight like a human. Elder Morden's voice echoed through the arena. "Begin." Voss did not rush forward immediately. His centuries of experience had taught him patience. Instead, he began moving in a wide circle around Jake, his clubs ready, looking for the best angle of attack. This was classic Saurian combat doctrine. Establish dominance through superior positioning, then strike with overwhelming force. Jake turned to keep facing his opponent, but his movement was different from what the aliens expected. Instead of mirroring Voss's deliberate circling, Jake seemed to flow, his position shifting constantly in small, subtle ways. He looked like he was dancing, but there was no recognizable pattern to his steps. The crowd watched in fascination. Most had expected the fight to be over quickly, but both fighters seemed to be taking their time. Voss continued his patient circling, looking for an opening. Jake continued his strange, flowing movement, never staying in the same position for more than a second. "What is the human doing?" asked Elder Keshmara from the ethereal section. "His movement serves no tactical purpose I can identify." But Jake knew exactly what he was doing. Every small shift of position was giving him information about Voss's reactions and movement patterns. He was also making it harder for the Saurian to predict where he would be when the attack finally came. After nearly a minute of circling, Voss decided to test his opponent. He made a quick feint with his left club. Not a real attack, but a probe to see how the human would react. Jake's response surprised everyone watching. Instead of stepping back or raising his hands to block, he simply was not there when the feint arrived. He had flowed sideways so quickly and smoothly that it looked like magic. Voss's eyes narrowed. The human's reaction time was better than expected. He tried another feint, this time with his right club. Again, Jake was not where the feint was aimed. He had moved just enough to avoid it, then immediately returned to his flowing, unpredictable movement pattern. The crowd began to murmur. This was not what anyone had expected. Voss was clearly the superior fighter, but somehow a cow. What happened next would be talked about in alien military academies for decades to come. Jake Morrison stopped moving like the aliens expected any fighter to move and started moving like what he truly was, a persistence hunter whose ancestors had chased down prey across the African plains for millions of years. Voss launched another attack, this time a sweeping horizontal strike designed to catch Jake no matter which direction he dodged. It was a smart tactical choice, one that had worked against dozens of previous opponents. The clubs moved in perfect coordination, covering a wide arc that should have been impossible to avoid. Jake did not try to avoid it. Instead, he dropped low and flowed forward, sliding under the strike with fluid grace. He moved like liquid, his body somehow finding spaces that seemed too small for a human to fit through. By the time Voss's clubs completed their sweep, Jake was behind him. The crowd gasped in languages that had no translation. Several crystalline beings flashed bright white in shock. The insectoid nexus representatives clicked their mandibles rapidly, their equivalent of excited shouting. But Jake was not finished. Instead of striking Voss from behind and ending the demonstration, he flowed back out to fighting distance, his movements so smooth they seemed almost supernatural. He was not just fighting, he was teaching the galaxy a lesson about what humans could do. Voss spun around, his heavy footsteps making the arena floor vibrate. His yellow eyes showed something the alien observers had never seen before: uncertainty. In 2 centuries of combat, no opponent had ever moved like this human was moving. "Impossible," whispered Corthus from the Saurian viewing section. "No being can move that fast. It violates the laws of physics." But Elder Morden, floating above the combat, was beginning to understand. His ancient mind processed what he was seeing and compared it to thousands of years of biological data. "Not impossible," he murmured to himself, "just different." Jake resumed his flowing movement, but now the aliens could see what they had missed before. He was not just moving randomly. Every step, every shift of weight, every turn of his head was part of a larger pattern. He was reading Voss's movements, predicting his attacks, and positioning himself accordingly. Voss tried a different approach. Instead of single powerful strikes, he launched a combination attack. Left club high, right club low, then a thrust with both weapons together. It was a technique that had defeated warriors from 7 different species. Jake flowed through the combination like smoke through a forest. He bent backward to avoid the high strike, stepped sideways around the low one, and somehow twisted his entire body to slip past the final thrust. To the watching aliens, it looked like he had briefly become incorporeal. The arena erupted in noise. Aliens who had never shown emotion before were chittering, flashing, and humming in excitement. This was beyond anything they had imagined possible. In the human delegation section, Captain Park watched with growing pride and amazement. She had known Jake was skilled, but this level of performance was extraordinary even by human standards. "How is he doing that?" asked Lieutenant Watson, Jake's aide. "Earth gravity," Park replied softly. "We all grow up in higher gravity than most worlds. When humans train in standard galactic gravity, we become faster than anyone expects. But it is more than that. Look at how he moves." Watson watched more carefully. Jake's movement was unlike anything he had seen in military training. It was fluid, continuous, and somehow predictive. "He is not reacting to Voss's attacks," Watson realized. "He is anticipating them. Persistence hunting," Park explained. "Our ancestors had to track prey for hours or days, reading every sign, predicting every movement. Jake is applying those same instincts to combat. Voss was beginning to show frustration. His attacks were perfect by Saurian standards, but they kept hitting empty air. He increased the speed and power of his strikes, putting more force behind each blow. The clubs whistled through the air, with enough energy to shatter stone. But speed and power meant nothing if they could not connect with the target. Jake continued to flow around every attack, his movements becoming more confident as he learned Voss's patterns. Then Jake began his counterattack. Instead of just avoiding Voss's strikes, he started moving closer during each exchange. As Voss committed to an attack, Jake would flow past it and deliver a quick strike to a vulnerable point, then move away before the Saurian could respond. The first strike hit a nerve cluster at Voss's elbow. It was not powerful enough to cause real damage, but it made the Saurian's left arm go numb for a few seconds. Jake was already gone before Voss could retaliate. A second strike hit a pressure point on Voss's thigh. Again, not damaging, but enough to disrupt the muscle's function temporarily. Jake's knowledge of alien anatomy, gained through careful study the night before, was paying off. The human is using precision over power, observed Speaker of Many from the insectoid section. This is a tactical approach the collective did not predict. Each of Jake's strikes was small and seemingly insignificant, but they were accumulating. Voss found his movements becoming slightly slower, his reactions slightly delayed. The human was systematically shutting down his nervous system with surgical precision. Voss realized what was happening and changed tactics again. Instead of trying to hit Jake directly, he began using area effect attacks. He struck the arena floor with both clubs, sending vibrations through the metal that should have knocked Jake off balance. He used wide, sweeping strikes that covered as much space as possible, but Jake adapted to each new approach. When Voss struck the floor, Jake was already in the air, having read the attack's preparation in the Saurian's muscle tension. When the sweeping strikes came, Jake flowed beneath them or somehow found gaps that seemed too narrow for any being to pass through. The alien observers were no longer thinking about the outcome of the duel. They were witnessing something that challenged their understanding of what was possible in combat. Some had begun taking detailed recordings, knowing that others would never believe what they were seeing. The human's movement patterns show no recognizable martial arts structure, reported a Nexus combat analyst. Yet they are highly effective. This suggests an entirely different evolutionary approach to combat. Elder Morden was thinking the same thing. He had studied the combat techniques of every known species, but this was something new. The human fought like no other being in the galaxy. As the duel continued, Voss's breathing became heavier. His powerful attacks were draining his energy, while Jake seemed to use almost no effort at all. The human's breathing was steady and controlled, showing the endurance that had allowed his species to outlast much larger prey. Voss attempted one more major offensive. He feinted with his left club, then brought both weapons down in a devastating overhead strike that would have ended the fight if it had connected. The attack was so powerful that it cracked the arena floor where it hit, but Jake was not there. He had read the feint, anticipated the real attack, and flowed to the side so smoothly that it looked like he had teleported. As Voss's club struck the floor, Jake moved in for his most significant attack yet. Instead of hitting another pressure point, Jake flowed behind Voss and applied what human martial artists called a sleeper hold. But this was not a human opponent, so Jake had modified the technique based on his study of Saurian anatomy. He applied pressure to the specific nerve clusters that would affect a Saurian's consciousness. Voss tried to throw Jake off, but the human's position was perfect. Jake had wrapped around the Saurian like a living restraint, using his flexibility and leverage to maintain control despite the massive size difference. "Yield," Jake said quietly, his voice calm despite the physical exertion. Voss struggled for a few more seconds, but he could feel his strength fading as the human's technique took effect. His vision began to blur, and his legs started to shake. Proud Saurian warrior had two choices: surrender or lose consciousness. For a moment, his pride made him consider fighting until he collapsed. But then he looked up at the hundreds of alien faces watching from the observation decks. This was not about pride anymore. It was about respect. The human had shown him kind of combat skill he had never imagined possible. To continue fighting would not prove anything except that he could not recognize superior technique when he saw it. "I yield," Voss said, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's acoustics. Jake immediately released the hold and stepped back, allowing Voss to regain his full consciousness. The arena fell into complete silence for several long seconds. Then, Elder Morden's voice rang out, "Victory to Jake Morrison of Earth." The sound that erupted from the observation decks was unlike anything ever heard on Harmony's Edge. Hundreds of different species created a symphony of amazement, excitement, and respect. Some aliens were clicking rapidly, others were flashing bright colors, and a few were making sounds that had no translation but clearly expressed wonder. Jakes stood in the center of the arena, breathing hard but not exhausted. He looked up at the cheering crowd and realized that everything had changed. Not just for him, but for all of humanity. Voss slowly got to his feet, his dignity intact despite his defeat. He walked over to Jake and extended one massive clawed hand. When Jake took it, the Saurian spoke in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "I have fought warriors." The medical bay of Harmony's Edge had never been so busy. Not because anyone was seriously injured, but because every species representative wanted to understand what they had just witnessed. Dr. Kethmara, the station's chief medical officer, and a member of the Crystalline Collective, found herself surrounded by beings asking the same questions over and over. "How is such speed possible?" asked a Nexus representative for the 10th time. "Our calculations show that the human's movement patterns should be impossible given his apparent muscle mass and bone density." Dr. Kethmara's crystalline form pulsed with patient blue light. "The answer is in the data we have been overlooking. Earth's gravity is 1.1 times galactic standard. That may seem like a small difference, but over millions of years of evolution, it creates significant advantages." She projected a holographic display showing comparative anatomy. "Look at human bone density, muscle fiber composition, and nervous system development. They are built for higher gravity and more dangerous environments than most species encounter." Zektar. Voss sat on a medical bed nearby, fully recovered from his brief unconsciousness, but still processing what had happened to him. His aide, Korthus, stood beside him with an expression of confused respect. "Honored Voss," Korthus said quietly, "in all your centuries of combat, have you ever faced anything like that human's fighting style?" Voss shook his massive head slowly. "Never. I have fought opponents who were faster, and opponents who were more flexible, but never one who seemed to know what I was going to do before I did it." He paused, his yellow eyes thoughtful. It was like fighting a prediction algorithm with a physical body. Jake Morrison entered the medical bay, having changed from his combat clothes into his standard uniform. The conversations around the room quieted as aliens turned to look at him with new respect and curiosity. "How are you feeling?" Jake asked Voss in a tone of genuine concern. The Saurian warrior managed something that might have been a smile. "My pride is more damaged than my body." Young human. But perhaps that is not a bad thing. "I have learned something today that I should have learned long ago." "What is that?" "That there are many ways to be strong, and many forms of wisdom. Your species may be young in galactic terms, but you bring capabilities that none of us possess." Voss stood up, his full height making Jake look small again. "I formally request that you teach me your fighting techniques." The medical bay went completely silent. A Saurian warrior with 2 centuries of experience was asking a human to be his instructor. It was unprecedented. Jake looked around at all the alien faces watching him. I would be honored to share what I know, but I think there is something more important we should discuss. Captain Lisa Park chose that moment to enter the medical bay, followed by Elder Morden and several other senior peacekeepers. Her face showed pride, mixed with barely contained excitement. Jake, she said, trying to keep her voice professional, we need to talk. The Galactic Peacekeeping Council has called an emergency session. They want to discuss what happened today and what it means for future peacekeeping operations. Elder Morden floated forward, his gaseous form brighter than usual. The display of combat capability we witnessed raises many questions, not just about human abilities, but about our assumptions regarding effective peacekeeping techniques. What kind of questions? Jake asked. For 3,000 years, galactic peacekeeping has relied on overwhelming force, superior technology, and formal combat traditions. Elder Morden explained. Your victory today was achieved through none of these methods. Instead, you used mobility, prediction, and precision. These are not techniques we have seen before. Dr. Kethmara added her analysis. Preliminary review of the combat recordings shows that you are not just reacting to Zektar Voss's attacks. You are reading his intention to attack before he had fully committed to the action. How is this possible? Jake thought about how to explain something that was instinctive to humans, but apparently unknown to other species. On Earth, my ancestors were persistence hunters. We hunted animals that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. The only way to succeed was to understand our prey completely, to read their behavior, predict their movements, and outlast their initial advantages. But Voss is not prey, pointed out Speaker of Many from the insectoid delegation. He is a trained warrior with centuries of experience. That actually made it easier, Jake replied. Trained fighters develop patterns and habits. They rely on techniques that have worked before. My job was to learn those patterns quickly and find ways around them. The aliens exchanged looks that conveyed amazement across multiple species. What Jake was describing was a completely different approach to combat than anything in their experience. Captain Park stepped forward. There is something else the Council needs to know. Jake's performance today, while exceptional, is not unique. Among humans, our military training produces many individuals with similar capabilities. This announcement caused another wave of excited discussion among the alien representatives. If one human could defeat a legendary Saurian warrior, what could a team of trained humans accomplish? How many humans possess these abilities? Asked Elder Morden. Every human military unit trains in similar techniques, Park replied. We call it adaptive combat, but it is based on hunting instincts that all humans share to some degree. Jake is highly skilled, but not superhuman by our standards. Voss looked at Jake with new understanding. This is why your species has been successful in peacekeeping operations. You do not fight the way we expect anyone to fight. That is part of it, Jake agreed, but there is more. Humans work well in teams, we adapt quickly to new situations, and we do not give up easily. These traits served us well as hunters, and they serve us well as peacekeepers. Elder Morden's form pulsed with what Jake had learned was the ethereal equivalent of excitement. The Council must hear this. If human techniques can be adapted for other species, it could revolutionize our approach to peacekeeping. Some techniques can be taught, Jake said carefully, but many of them depend on human-specific capabilities. Our reflexes, our endurance, our pattern recognition, these developed over millions of years of evolution. Other species would need to develop their own versions based on their unique advantages. Dr. Kethmara's crystalline form brightened. This suggests that every species may have undiscovered capabilities that could contribute to peacekeeping effectiveness. We have been thinking too narrowly about combat and conflict resolution. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of more alien representatives. Word of Jake's victory had spread throughout the station, and everyone wanted to understand what had happened. Ambassador Tidalflow from the Aquatic Union approached Jake directly. "Human Morrison, my school has observed your species in training exercises, but we never understood what we were seeing. Your people move differently underwater than any air-breathing species we know. Humans are natural swimmers," Jake explained. "We can hold our breath longer than most species and move efficiently in three-dimensional environments. These abilities transfer to zero-gravity and low-gravity combat situations." "Remarkable," clicked a Nexus representative. "Our species excels in rapid coordination and multiple-limb combat, but we have never considered how to apply these advantages in peacekeeping scenarios." Jake realized what was happening. His victory over Voss had done more than prove human capabilities. It had opened the galaxy's eyes to the possibility that every species might have unique contributions to make to peacekeeping effectiveness. Captain Park seemed to reach the same conclusion. "Perhaps," she said to the assembled aliens, "it is time to stop thinking about peacekeeping as a one-size-fits-all approach. Maybe we should be developing techniques that use each species' natural advantages." Elder Morden floated higher, his excitement clear to everyone present. "The Council will want to explore this immediately. We may be looking at the most significant advancement in peacekeeping methodology in galactic history." Over the next hour, the medical bay became an impromptu conference room as representatives from every species shared observations about human capabilities and discussed their own species' potential contributions. The crystalline beings could change density and become nearly invisible. The Nexus representatives could coordinate perfectly without verbal communication. The Aquatic Union could operate in environments that would kill most other species. Jake found himself at the center of a revolution in thinking about galactic peacekeeping. What had started as a simple challenge to human honor had become a revelation about the untapped potential of interspecies cooperation. As the discussions continued, Voss approached Jake privately. "I owe you an apology," the Saurian said quietly. "I challenged your species' honor because I thought you were weak and unworthy." "I was wrong." "You are not wrong to test us," Jake replied. "That is how we learn what we are capable of. I am grateful for the opportunity to show what humans can contribute." Voss nodded slowly. "I have a proposal. I would like to work with you to develop new training methods that combine Saurian strength and endurance with human mobility and prediction. Together, we might create something better than either approach alone." Jake smiled. "I would like that very much." The day ended with the Galactic Peacekeeping Council voting unanimously